Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria QK.
Hi everyone, welcome to Mother Knows Death. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about a shocking update with Yankee Brett Gardner's son's death investigation, a man caught putting Gorilla Glue into a coworker's soda, the Luigi Mangione Act, a child who died from anesthesia after routine dental work, breast milk flavored ice cream, mystery pee jugs, and more. Let's get started with this Yankee's son's death. This is so terrible.
Yeah, so last week we had reported about the death of Brett Gardner, who's a former Yankees son. While they were in, just as a quick reminder, while they were in Costa Rica, they had gone to a restaurant, and when they got back, a couple family members had been ill. They got treated by a doctor, and their son unfortunately passed away. So at first they were thinking it was food poisoning and maybe asphyxia related to the food poisoning. Then they said they didn't know. It was going to be a couple weeks for the autopsy results to come back. And now they're saying it might be carbon monoxide.
So this would make sense too, that all of these people were sick. You would assume that doctors taking care of these people would have ruled that out right away. And they were convinced that it was food poisoning, because the symptoms now that they're saying this are headache, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, shortness of breath, confusion, which is quite possible if all of these people went out to dinner and then got back to the hotel and all started feeling sick around the same time. I would think that doctors would, especially being in a hotel like that, they would have immediately ruled something like that out, and that's why they were convinced that they had foodborne illness. I'm sure that from people that are doctors that take care of patients in these different circumstances, that they do have different presentations for sure. And again, remember we were talking about how under certain circumstances, I don't know if we were talking about it on this show or one that we recently recorded, but how these people with money that are in these higher end hotels, or just in general that have more means, sometimes get what we would call the VIP treatment, which is like, let's say you and I went to Florida and we started having symptoms like this. We would go to the hospital, right? But in this case, this guy's a high profile Yankee. They're at this really expensive hotel, and they were able to just call a medical team to see what was going on with the family. And if they would have went to the hospital and got worked up properly, this is something that could have been determined with blood work. So, I mean, it's not necessarily something that you could just figure out on your own, I guess, but I would say that the symptoms, I would just think if you've taken care of people with food poisoning, it just would have a little bit of a different presentation. But, so now they're working that up again. He's been dead over a week now, right? I don't know why they don't have the answer to this. They're saying that now there was levels of carbon monoxide in the room, which is fine, but that doesn't mean that that's what he died from. So unless they were off the charts that they could really figure out, because there's like a certain level that you could have near you, but it really shouldn't be that much, especially in a confined space. But now they're saying that there was some kind of mechanical room that was right next to their hotel room, and that's how the fumes were potentially getting into their room. And when you have a confined space like that doesn't have any ventilation, this is how this happens.
I guess I was under the assumption that anybody exposed to carbon monoxide would die pretty quickly. So I guess I'm just confused as a layperson that he died and other people were sick, but they didn't die.
So we're all exposed to carbon monoxide all the time. When you're outside and you're breathing in the exhaust from a car, you're exposed to it. But the thing is that the balance is that there's more oxygen in the air that you're breathing in than carbon monoxide. So kids and infants are sometimes at a higher risk for this because they breathe more breaths than adults do, just something as simple as that. Also just depends on what part of the room they were in, like what was happening. It's just really difficult to tell what was happening in that situation. But even like if you make barbecue and stuff, people do that and it's fine. But that's why they tell you not to do it indoors, because it just could make carbon monoxide just accumulate in a room and can kill someone right off the bat. So when they this is what's interesting to me. When they did the autopsy and the gross exam, and at first, I'm not sure why they said that they thought he died an asphyxial death, but technically a carbon monoxide poisoning would be considered an asphyxial death. It's just more by a chemical means rather than mechanical, like you would think of choking on something or being strangled would be like a mechanical asphyxia death.
Well, I thought they ruled that out because they were saying his airway was clear, but you're trying to say that if it was a chemical asphyxiation that it would be clear because it's a different type, or?
Yeah, exactly. Because what happens with carbon monoxide is that, the whole point of breathing is for the respiratory system to pick up oxygen, carry it to the organs, drop it off at the organs, pick up the used, bring it back, breathe it out. And it just goes like that in a circle. And what happens is that does happen when people are breathing the oxygen in from the room. But when there's carbon monoxide, that also attaches to the blood cells, and it doesn't let that oxygen get released to the organs in order to give oxygen to your whole entire body. And if your organs, especially your brain, does not have oxygen, it will stop working. And so technically, like, asphyxia is just a lack of oxygen, whether it's from mechanical means of strangling someone or if it's something happening on a microscopic level with the blood cells. So what's interesting to me, though, is that when someone dies of carbon monoxide poisoning, they have very specific gross findings that we would see at autopsy. One of it is the livor mortis, which is normally a purple color. That's when the blood leaves the circulatory system and falls to where the dependent area is. So if someone died in their bed, it would be on their back. That is normally like a purplish color, and that would be a bright red color, which is called cherry red lividity. And it's something that anybody doing autopsies would automatically notice was weird. Also, it could cause their blood to be a very bright red color, like Kool-Aid red, and their skeletal muscle could be really red too. So anybody doing the autopsy would be like, wait a second, this looks weird. We need to test for this. But again, this is a blood test that could be done. This isn't really considered toxicology that you should have to wait for a long time. So I feel like maybe they know more than they're leading on to at this point, just until they finish the investigation.
Yeah, do you think the hotel is going to end up being responsible for this?
100% yes.
Yeah, because they clearly didn't have any detectors in the room, so, if they did, they weren't working.
This reminds me of, we wrote a case back in the gross room back in 2022 do you remember when the couples had went to the Bahamas in the Sandals Resort, and there was this villa thing that was kind of a twin, what you would consider to be a twin. There was two different hotel rooms inside of this one villa, and there was one couple in one of these rooms, and then there was another couple in another one of the rooms, and 3 of the 4 people died from carbon monoxide poisoning, the same exact thing, on vacation. Terrible. And I was just telling you, like, we just stayed at an Airbnb this weekend, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't even check to see if they had a carbon monoxide detector. And this is like a simple thing that you could bring with you on a trip, because it's kind of scary that something like this could happen that's out of your control that you wouldn't even think of, because carbon monoxide is tasteless, odorless. So if everybody's having symptoms, I could easily see you attributing it to food poisoning.
I'm just surprised it's not mandatory when you're having an Airbnb, or, I mean, maybe it is, and I just don't know. I would think it would
I don't
be
think it's mandatory, but I do see that you could use that as a filter option, and it's set, and people, you know how it'll say, like, oh, there's a washing machine, there's central air conditioning, things like that. I've definitely seen that it's checked off, and it really should be on everyone's list to notice that. I guess I kind of put it out of mind because I'm married to a firefighter, and I'm like, if there's a problem, he'll know it, which is probably not the best way to be.
The man that didn't even notice you caught your kitchen on fire.
Exactly, right? For those of you that don't remember, I was cooking a couple weeks ago, and I caught my kitchen on fire by accident a little tiny bit, but my husband was just sitting there playing on his phone and didn't even notice. It was hilarious. But but yeah, I don't know, like, this, it's so scary because you do hear about this happening from time to time, and just think, like, if you're just a regular person and you're on vacation in Costa Rica and everybody starts getting sick, that would be your first thought. I don't really understand why the medical team didn't really even have that in their differential, you know?
It just seemed I think I didn't say this on here and I said it on the other show we were a guest on last week. I think that a lot of times these investigators are like talking out of turn or like they're just, they want to be the first person to get the information out and they're just saying things before the reports are clean. And we covered this a lot with the Dr. Thomas Noguchi episode we did, where it's like, it's okay to just wait a couple days. I know the media is crazy and everything, but wouldn't you rather wait and say the correct thing than rush and say the incorrect thing? And now everybody thinks that you're not handling it appropriately.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just and it's all in the news and the family's still dealing with this death and just the speculation is annoying and,
Well, yeah, that's the
but
worst part is for the Gardners having to deal with this constantly coming up and it's like this happened, no this happened, no this happened. Just if you did the job right and slow and steady wins the race. Just do the right thing. Let this family mourn and move on.
the same thing happened though in those Bahama deaths. It was like the people were having these crazy symptoms and unfortunately 3 of the 4 died from it. And you can survive it if you get treatment right away, but most people, once you're having those severe symptoms, it could be too late. And especially if you fall asleep, forget it, and you're just exposed to it and breathing it in even more. It's just kind of scary, honestly.
Believe it or not, we have 2 stories this week about people tampering with their coworkers' beverages. I mean, the next one's going to be a little more involved, but I can't even believe this after just talking about that guy last week that was sticking his penis in his coworker's water bottle.
Yeah, I guess it's, you do trust a lot of people being around you when they're preparing your food, or in these cases when you're just working and you walk away. I can't even imagine, and I've worked with some shady characters in the past for sure, but I can't imagine just thinking that anybody would actually do that to somebody. It's like a whole other level of sick to give to try to poison people, or even if it's a joke, just to do something like that. It's kind of not cool. I mean, it's definitely not cool, but I feel like you're on another level of a kind of sick individual to do something like that.
No, so in this first story, this happened in Wisconsin. This chick was at work. She had a can of Coke on her desk that she left unattended, I'm assuming. So she goes to drink it, and then after she drank it, she noticed a really weird smell in it, and then, of course, got sick right away. So she sets up a hidden camera at her desk, and I think within only 2 weeks, she caught one of her coworkers squeezing a bottle of super glue into the can of Coke.
Yeah, so specifically it was Gorilla Glue gel with the little blue lid. I have it in my house. I use it all the time for my arts and crafts projects. First, to me, it's just a very weird thing to put into someone's drink if you're trying to hurt them, because it smells so strong.
Yeah.
I don't understand why you would use that. The chemical in it is called ethyl cyanoacrylate, and it is basically a liquid or a gel inside of the Gorilla Glue container, but then once it fuses, it becomes a hard plastic. On the website for Gorilla Glue, they have manufacturer warnings about what to happen if you get this glue in your eye, because obviously that's the most common, or on your hands, and what happens. But it says that really if you inhale it, it could just cause severe trauma and to not induce vomiting, call the poison control center, and it could have harmful adverse effects. So it doesn't really get super specific on like, well, because that's all I want to know is like, well, what happens in this case if you have it? So I did find some cases of accidental ingestion of this chemical, which most commonly happens in toddlers, because that's the only person that would ever not
Willingly.
know. Yes, exactly. Put it inside of their mouth. And in those cases, there's been cases of pieces of plastic being found in the respiratory tract, in the trachea. But most commonly, when people get super glue into their mouth, it causes it to get stuck on their teeth and inside of their oral cavity, because it does bond very quickly once it hits the air. So they say that you shouldn't try to peel it off yourself. You should go to a dentist or the hospital and try to eat peanut butter or oil to try to get it to slip off, because obviously if you rip it off, it's going to rip off the top layers of the lining of your mouth or your skin, wherever it bonds. But if you ever accidentally have something like this in your mouth, you should always get emergency treatment. I was actually thinking that it's possible that she may not have had any of it because it smelled so strongly, and you would think like drinking it from a can, the most place that you would think that there would be trauma might be her lips or something.
Well, don't you think she at least had a little sip, because she said she got sick? So I don't think that would have just been from the smell.
I don't know, but what does get I don't know what get sick means, because I don't think that that do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't make you feel nauseous if she got, I'm telling you, like if she got that close to it and just breathed it in, just inhaling that could cause respiratory problems, irritation, coughing, shortness of breath. So I think that that's more than likely what happened, because if she actually drank it and got it in her mouth, she would have had the residue of the glue somewhere, you know? Like that would have had to been addressed. So I think it was more just from inhaling the vapors of it. And I can't even imagine that you would be able to even drink something with those vapors coming out of the whole of the can, you know? So he, did he say why he was doing it, or?
I mean, he didn't really reveal his motive, so she contacted the police after having clear footage of him doing it. They searched his office. They found latex gloves and the Gorilla Glue in his office. So, like, you didn't even get rid of the evidence that quickly, which is so stupid as a criminal. But he's been arrested and charged with placing a foreign object into a drink with the intent to cause harm.
I wonder if, because I feel like I read in the article that they found that he was doing it to other people as well, so it wasn't necessarily attacked directly to her.
Well, it's kind of like the guy last week. I think you obviously have a sickness that you're doing it at all, and then you get like a rush or like some type of thrill from doing it, and then you just keep doing it. But like, what happened if somebody died? I would I really think he should be charged with attempted murder.
Yeah, I mean, I do too, honestly. Because like, what else was he trying to do? Was he trying to play a joke? What? I'm sorry, I just don't see that. And it's actually funny because we're going to be talking about this in the next story as well. But today's April Fool's Day as well. And I was just listening to our local radio station while I was getting ready today about jokes that are played on people for April Fool's Day. And this to me is not considered, it's not considered a joke for people to unwillingly ingest something that they're not aware of. It's just never funny.
No, and
I don't know. Like we did that once for Gabe, like, because we looked up years ago like different things to do, and one of them was like to take apart an Oreo and take the cream out and put toothpaste in between the two layers. And
okay,
like,
well,
I don't
that's
know.
toothpaste.
That's like, toothpaste is edible though, and if you take a bite of it, you would spit it out and whatever. Like, it's
not
gross.
like you put spackle in the middle of it to make it look the same. Like,
exactly. Like that's where you're just like, and it's not like a drug or a medication or anything. It's like, it's just kind of, you know, replace the shampoo with ketchup or whatever, like funny jokes like that. But then you're like a certain level of sick if you're giving someone something that's not safe for consumption.
I mean, this is no surprise for anybody that listens and knows our personalities. I hate April Fool's Day. I think it's so fucking stupid. All day on Instagram seeing like, Beverly Hills Housewives has been canceled. Oh, haha, real good one. Like, or like people making fake flavors of like, you know, alcohol, ice cream, whatever. It's just very annoying to me. I don't think it's funny. I don't like when people text me and then they're like, just kidding. Like, I'm fucking busy and I don't have time for it. I'm sorry.
I like the idea of playing jokes. I don't think you need a specific day for it. I mean, Lillian destroyed Gabe this morning. Because she's off school this week, you know, and she went downstairs last night while we went to bed, and she put hand cream all over the knobs of his bathroom. She wrote all over his mirror with lipstick. She put the favorite one is she put saran wrap over the toilet, so when he pees it like goes all over the floor. Because, you know, like when you wake up, I mean, he starts and gets ready for work at like 5 a.m. and it's dark out and he probably doesn't even put the light on. And he's like, I got pee all over the floor. So I don't know, like it's a kid's thing. I don't hate it as much as you do. I just think it's pointless kind of, but one
For
of
kids,
the
whatever, but like when adults are doing it, it's like grow up.
I don't know. Like this one woman called and said that she put a bumper sticker on her husband's car that was just like I pooped today, and this was like 20 years ago when like poop wasn't as like there just wasn't as many of those things as there are now, you know. And she said he's like a construction worker and has a pickup truck, and everyone was driving by and like beeping at him and putting a thumbs up, and he was like, what the hell's going on? And he didn't notice it all day. Like, I don't know, I think that's kind of funny.
Do you know how many celebrities are going to post fake pregnancy announcements today? There's at least 5 to 10 every year.
Yeah, and I think our friend Amy Lochran posted something about that last night that was just like that's not funny. Like,
No, like Tori Spelling did it like a year or two ago and everybody was like, it's really not funny.
exactly. But like don't why don't there's a million, you know what, I'll just keep my mouth shut on this. Let's talk about this next story involving a similar thing.
Well, this guy claimed that these were practical jokes too, which maybe that's why I'm getting so butthurt about it for this episode, because none of the following we're going to discuss is funny at all. So a couple police officers in North Bergen, this is in New Jersey, at their police department, they filed complaints against their chief of police for inappropriate behavior, including putting Adderall and Viagra in the communal coffee pot, pooping on the floor, and allegedly poking an officer in the genitals with a hypodermic needle, among many other things. Haha, real funny.
This really, when I was reading this, I was just like, okay, this dude, they're trying to say that it's disgruntled employees that are trying to get this guy fired, but I feel like some of these practical jokes or pranks are so specific that, like, why would somebody just make them up and multiple people make them up? He would apparently like show up at officers' homes or bring like items to their house and get it delivered, like flags of gay pride flags and dildos and masturbation cream and stuff. Like this guy is just like an attention seeking whatever, but it just reminds me of like a Jackass movie or something, except the people aren't willing participants, and this guy is
and
just
this
doing
is a fucking police department. So
yeah,
it's like
and he's
totally
like a
inappropriate.
grown up and just doing it to be funny or whatever. I don't know, but it's actually really alarming that any grown person, any grown up would do things like this. Like, you're gonna poop on the floor, so someone steps in your poop by accident. Like, that's just weird. Putting drugs in someone's, see, that to me is like a whole other level of putting Adderall or Viagra into a coffee is a whole other.
It's poisoning. It is poisoning when you put. It's like the last case too, when you're putting something in somebody's food that is not supposed to be there. You are poisoning them. And this is not like, he was like, oh, I'm going to put Viagra in the coffee pot so everybody gets a bunch of boners, right? Like, that's not funny. And aren't people with certain conditions not supposed to take Viagra?
Yes, exactly. Like, and nobody should be taking any drug that they didn't say they wanted to take. Like, it's the bottom line. But the township of North Bergen is like standing up for him and saying they have full confidence in his leadership, and they strongly deny these false claims and allegations made by disgruntled officers. Like, I get people being disgruntled and stuff, but this is just like such a weird specific thing that why would you just make up that someone was sticking a needle in someone's genitals and stuff? I 100% see this happening because I've known people like this in the past that just it's very weird behavior from a grown-up, especially a professional of law enforcement of all things.
Yeah, like the examples are just for me way too specific to be made up, and I just also feel like if multiple people are coming forward, they must have some proof in some capacity. I mean, of course all of these claims are alleged to have happened, but like, you think all these police officers are going to put their job on the line?
It is an interesting thing though, because if there is no proof, which I feel like in 2025, people are able to get proof of this somehow, either with text messages or video, anything like that. But it's actually an interesting thing that if there is no proof and then there's also history that there was some kind of relationship that people would want to retaliate against him, even if it's 100% true. Like, I don't know what they do in those cases, because you can't just, because people do make up stuff sometimes, so you can't just fire somebody because of that, right?
Well,
But I don't know. It's just a very, it's not like, okay, you're just saying, oh, he sexually assaulted me and wouldn't give me a promotion or something. That it's very like these just very odd things that people would say.
yeah, and
I don't know.
he's only been the chief for a year. I think he only got sworn in as the chief last February. And then this article was explaining that these complaints they filed are like the first step before you could sue the employer. So if they're planning on going forth with a lawsuit, I'm assuming that they have sufficient evidence, because what lawyer would take on this? Will be high profile, police versus like all these cops involved in this, and they have another police department investigating it to avoid conflict of interest. I'm like, oh, because of the whole Karen Reed thing, now everybody's learning that you can't just like have this department look into their own case.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Whatever.
we'll report back if we hear anything else, because the allegations are quite disturbing, and I think that he probably shouldn't have a job anymore if it's true.
Yeah, I mean, if they find this to be true, he absolutely should never be allowed to work in law enforcement ever again. It's just totally inappropriate. Okay, so there was a newly proposed California ballot initiative. So it was submitted to the California Attorney General, hoping it would make it more difficult for health insurance companies to deny coverage, and they're calling it the Luigi Mangione Act.
This is a very difficult one for me to think about, because I do think that this is a good idea and this bill should definitely be put forth, because I've told you that I've had personal experiences with this, and so have probably 95% of our listeners that have had problems with getting certain things covered for insurance. And part of the bill is to say that only physicians can make these decisions. They can't just employ somebody to make these decisions. And if they decide to delay any kind of treatment, they would have to produce convincing evidence that the medication or the procedure was unnecessary. They can't just say, I mean, it literally just happened to me, like with Lucia trying to get her a certain medication, that her rheumatologist called the insurance and was like, she needs this medication. And they said, yeah, no. And that's it. And there was no reason for why. It just was, oh, because that's how it is. And we were able to get it through other programs and things like that. But that's what this bill is meant to do. I don't, and obviously this should have been done a long time ago, and it shouldn't have taken a guy to kill the CEO of United Healthcare for this to happen, but that's what happened. So, and I tell you all the time, I don't agree with people taking the law into their own hands. So I agree with this act. I don't think it should be named after him, because all you're doing is glorifying his actions, and that's not a good idea.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think everybody can agree that the health insurance in the United States is like absolutely out of control right now. And I think having bills like this coming up are going to help regulate that market, because let's be honest, it's just like it's totally out of control and nobody can get a grasp on it right now. I mean, even like with medical insurance things that we're doing, I talk to the doctor, I call the insurance, I talk to them. Everybody has different answers. It doesn't reflect the same when I get the bill in the mail. Why is it such a complicated system? I do agree with you 100% that calling it the Luigi Mangione Act is going to be their mistake, because a lot of people, while a lot of people back him, there's also a lot of people that think he's a murderer and it's not justified. And by naming this, like you're saying, it's exactly glorifying his actions. And I feel like that's going to prevent this bill from going through because of the name.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if this act actually goes through, from the end of time, everybody will be like, oh, that's like, it might be called that by everybody.
You
but
can nickname it that,
don't
but,
officially yeah, you can't officially do that, because then that gives him that makes it justified for him, and then others will try to do things similar. I mean, it's the whole copycat thing, right? Oh, this guy is being held as a hero and he did this, and now he has an act named after him, and things are going to change because of him. Well, what other thing is some other person going to stand up and do like that? And I mean, I guess on one sense you could say, well, that's the only way shit gets done, because there is some truth to that. And anybody that's even against this happening, including myself, there is definitely some truth to that, because this bill would not be here right now if he didn't do that, because people just don't take it seriously until, they get punched in the face with it or whatever.
Well,
But
I don't know if you saw this morning too, but Laura just shared that the Attorney General is now seeking the death penalty for him.
But I heard that, and that was because of the terrorism thing or whatever.
So I'm bringing this up because, like, I really am convinced we're going to have a really difficult time finding a jury in this country that is going to convict him, let alone give him death for this crime. Because even though a lot of people can agree it was wrong and he shouldn't have murdered that man, there is not one person in this country that is not affected by the health insurance companies. So, like, think about this.
I do. I don't know. It's just like something that you go back and forth with. And the death penalty, like, it technically is considered like a terroristic threat, because now you're not only like you did this because of this response, but then you're going to have other people. I mean, think about anybody else that's in charge of these healthcare companies. It's like they're scared now. They're very scared now, right? Which that's the whole thing of terrorism. So I guess that's why they're deciding on that particular thing. But I agree with you. And I feel like I could be open-minded to it in a jury, just because I didn't have like necessarily a life or death situation. I just had a terrible inconvenience for multiple hours and weeks of my life trying to get it sorted out. But ultimately, like, through other programs and coupons and everything, my kid was able to get a medication that normally cost some insane amount of money, whatever it was, $2,000 a month or whatever it was.
But in the court, when you start hearing stories
from
there's the
people
other side about people with cancer that were denied life-saving treatments, it's going to hit your heart a different way.
Oh, absolutely it is. And you're 100% right, because it doesn't matter if you go to an area that's more, has more money or has different politics, anything. Like, this is blanket across the board problems. Now, I think the situation would be a little bit more different if, let's say, for example, his mom was denied life-saving treatment and she died, and they weren't independently wealthy, and they were just like regular blue-collar people that were a victim of this, which most people that are low to middle class people that are being affected by this kind of stuff. I feel like people would have way more sympathy for him. It's just a little unusual because he was completely uninvolved with the whole thing. Like, he had enough money to pay for everything. He wasn't even covered by this particular healthcare. So, and we don't even know, like, really any details of this yet, because he hasn't gone on trial or anything yet. So we have no idea, like, what his reasoning was per se, like what triggered him to do this. And so we kind of have to wait for all that as well. And maybe it was like one of his friends or something. I don't know, but we just, like, in general, to keep order here in this country, we should just not be okay with someone taking the law into their hands like this.
No, they need to rename it. Like, this is an excellent proposed ballot, but they have to change the name, because the controversy behind the name is going to prevent it from moving forward. And, like, you can't be dumb enough to let that get in the way.
I guess you could argue, though, that, like, everybody's talking about it because of that. And maybe that's the point of the more people know about it, the more people are likely to back it. And the only way to spread it, like, if right now, let's say, for example, they just said, oh, they're introducing new legislation for this, I don't even know if we would have covered it. Do you understand? And not that we're anybody, but I'm saying, like, every news source is now covering it because it was called that. So that's ultimately the point, is to see how many eyes can see it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, all right. This story really, really is upsetting.
So in San Diego, this 9-year-old girl was put under anesthesia for a dental procedure, and then hours later, she died at home.
Yeah, so obviously, like, one of our best friends' kids has to get anesthesia because he has a lot of medical anxiety because he had surgery and stuff when he was a kid. So when you hear something like this, you're like, people that have to go through this, and this is a common thing that people go through all the time. So what the hell happened? But when you start really digging into the story, it seems like there was a lot of inappropriate things happening. Like, the dentist is saying that she came out of anesthesia. She was totally fine. She was awake and alert, and they sent her home, and then she had died at home. But what's really unusual is that the girl's family is saying that when they took her home, she was asleep. She was still asleep after the procedure, and they let her take her home when she was still asleep, and they put her in bed and were checking on her throughout the night. And then they finally found her unresponsive and called 911, and she was taken to the hospital and was pronounced dead.
I mean, I can't see any situation at all where you would let a person that has not woken up from anesthesia go home yet, unsupervised by a medical professional.
So, I mean, I guess as of right now, this is the dentist saying this versus the family saying this. I just think, like, why would a family make this up? Like, they're saying they took their kid home and she was still sleeping. I don't really understand. But so we don't know what the manner of cause of death were yet because they're doing an autopsy and working it up. So what they'll look at, especially in a 9-year-old, because kids could have underlying heart conditions that they don't know about. So they're going to look to see if she has any kind of congenital heart anomaly that could have been responsible for this. But also they'll do toxicology and look at the levels to see what medications she was given, especially because this dude back in 2016 was under investigation for giving a 54-year-old too much anesthesia, which led to his heart stopping. And then they figured out that one of the drugs he was given should have never been given to him. So this guy already has a history of this, and that's what they're going to rule out. I mean, the kid's dead ultimately. Like, that happened. That's truth. And the autopsy will show what happened. This episode is brought to you by us because we are so excited that we had 1 million downloads of Mother Knows Death so far that we are celebrating with a huge giveaway.
Yeah, so you guys, as part of the giveaway, you could enter for a chance to win a skull giant microbe, a signed Nicole and Jemmy's anatomy book, and 1 free year to the gross room. So
yes,
to enter,
that is going to be so awesome.
no, it's going to be really awesome. So, and it's applicable to existing gross room members now. We could just tack it on your year already. So to enter the contest, you're going to head over to Apple, leave us a written review, or Spotify, leave us a review, or YouTube and subscribe to us. And then you're going to send us a screenshot of either your review or your subscription and send it to stories@motherknowsdeath.com. You guys have a couple weeks to enter the contest. We are going to let it go until April 18th, and then we will release the winners the following week. We are so excited and so thankful that you guys got us to 1 million.
Yes, thank you so much. And we hope you enjoy listening. So do you think, since it's April Fool's Day, is it possible that this company is like trying to play a jokes on us with this next story?
I would say not. So the company Frida, the baby product company, has announced that in 9 months they have a due date for a breast milk flavored ice cream.
I don't know how this is going to go because obviously, like, I want to try it, although I never tried my breast milk, so I don't really know what it tastes like. Gabe has, though, so maybe we can get him to try it and see if it's close enough. But
I don't think we need the details of why
yes,
that went down.
There was a couple different times it went down actually, and we don't have to get into that right now. But remember we've talked about several times like people consuming human milk, and just that there's no health organization that actually recommends that adults need to consume breast milk for any reason.
No, but it seems like in this case, they're not going to be using real breast milk. So
no, it's just for, I guess, for awareness and just, I mean, kind of, it's a genius marketing ploy, honestly. It's true. So people do, like having human consumption of breast milk is like a celebrity thing too, especially like, I think one of the Kardashians said that she would drink it for a variety of illnesses and stuff. And there's really no robust evidence suggesting that human milk can be used to treat illnesses or infections, but bodybuilders use it too, which is really interesting, right?
well, yeah, but isn't it packed with like like a lot of nutrients and everything. That's why they're saying they want to use it.
They say they use it to lose fat and to bulk up, and there's a whole online marketplace for it, which is just so bizarre. I don't know. It's the same thing as like eating this animal versus this animal. You know, sometimes people say, "Ew, goat milk is gross," and you're like, "Yeah, but you drink cow milk. Like, what's the difference where it comes from, right?" So, I don't know why I've never tried it. I just like I don't know. I just never really had an interest in trying it, but now I regret it because I want to see if it tastes like this ice cream.
Well, it's interesting because this article is also citing that 70% of women have tried their own breast milk, while 29% of men are interested themselves. So it is quite popular that people do it. I mean, think about it. You have something coming out of your body, you're feeding it to your kid. Are you just not a little interested? I'm actually surprised you never tried it based on the way you are normally.
I know. I don't know why either. Maybe it just was like one of those, you know how when you're if you're pregnant or something, or even afterwards, you could like have these certain cravings for things and get turned off by other things, and maybe it was just one of those things that I just never was interested in. It sucks because I had it in my freezer up until we redid the kitchen like 2 years ago. So I finally got rid of it, and I felt bad getting rid of it, but I'm like, my kid's like 10 at this point. Should probably get rid of it.
Well, I mean, this ice cream does have the potential to be good. I mean, a lot of people on Reddit were equating the flavor of breast milk to being like leftover cereal milk, warm vanilla ice cream, chai tea, sweet almond milk. So if you like those flavors, you might be interested. And they're going to include some nutrients like omega-3, some important vitamins like iron, calcium, vitamin B, D, zinc, all the good stuff that's found in breast milk. So I guess this maybe will be considered a healthier ice cream. I don't know, but
just wait. Like it's watch it be the most delicious vanilla ice cream that ever existed, and
it
then
probably
you have to
is.
feel like all awkward getting it at the store. It's like buying tampons or something.
I was thinking when I was writing my notes for this, like, can you imagine like going on a date with a guy and going back to his house and he's got the breast milk ice cream in his freezer?
Yeah, right? You would be like, this guy is such a freak. He's such a kinky freak. I'm not dating him anymore.
That's like an episode of Sex and the City. It
Yeah,
would be
right?
like how would you feel about it? But I mean, I'll try it. If they want to send it to us, I'll try it. I'm going to put it out there. Okay, so this new study is suggesting that artificial sweeteners, which is something that's often used for weight loss, actually could trigger you to have a bigger appetite.
So this has been known for a couple of years. I'm not sure if they really had figured out what caused it, but back 2 years ago now, May of 2023, the World Health Organization had issued an advisory saying that these sugar substitutes for weight loss are not to be used. They do not help you with losing weight. And now they've done these extra studies that have shown that people have an increased appetite up to 20% more when they drink water with sucralose versus water with table sugar. So they're essentially saying that you're less hungry if you have a drink with table sugar as opposed to having this fake sugar, because it's turning on something in your brain that makes you hungrier, which makes sense because a lot of times you see people housing like 10 Diet Cokes a day and you're like, you're not really thin. Like, what's happening here? And it makes sense, and which is scary because you see the word Diet Coke and you think that it would be like drinking 0 calories, but in fact it's making you hungrier.
I mean, I want to say I've noticed a difference because a couple years ago, I mean, I used to house Splenda like nobody's business. I like the way it tastes. I would always get it in like iced tea or my coffees. And then when I got prescribed my migraine medication, the doctor told me to stop having artificial sweeteners because they could set off headaches. So I had switched to sugar, and I did happen to notice like I was snacking a lot less during the day because I wasn't having so much of it. I think it's an interesting correlation.
It is, and it does make sense though, because if you and listen, that stuff is in everything. It's in so much things. It was in one drink that I have, one of these hydrating drinks. Check those next time you drink them because they might have that kind of stuff in them. You know what it is when you have it. It gives you that like really, I don't know. I'm just so sensitive to the taste of it and I don't really enjoy it, but now there's actual proof that these drinks are not doing well for people. So I wonder if people actually stop drinking them instead of, um, thinking that they're helping with their weight loss or keeping their weight loss down, because in fact is working against you.
Yeah, now that this is kind of like more public information, I guess in the next like 5 to 10 years, we'll have a secondary study following up to see if people read this, made the shift, and seen an impact on it.
Well, it's just the same as everything, though. It's like I always use this example, like back in the day when I was a kid and we went to the grocery store, it was just like all we had were paper bags. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, we can't use these anymore. They're so terrible for the environment. They're cutting down all these trees and stuff. So we're going to start using these plastic bags. And we know where we ended up with that, right? So it's the same thing. Like back in the day when I was a kid and stuff, it was like sugar, sugar, sugar makes you fat. Take all these there's the diet drinks, the fake sugars to put inside your coffee and all this stuff. And of course, now they're just like, yeah, that stuff is, you're saying triggers migraines. It gives you terrible diarrhea if you have too much of it, like a laxative effect on people. Now we're the weight loss thing. We know that some of them cause cancer. So it's like you always hear about these things that are changing. I mean, like, guess what we're going to hear it about in 20 years from now? The magic drug that's causing everyone to lose weight. There's just always going to be these things that come down the line with it that you're like, oh, you know what? That actually probably wasn't better. And really, the drinking of the calories thing is a huge thing. So I think if you just stick with water, which I think it's gross, I get it, but maybe just like a little swig of like lemon juice, or you really shouldn't have that much either because it could be bad for your teeth, but like just a little drop of vanilla, or strain it through some fruit to give it a little hint of flavor is probably the best, because trying to artificially do something is not going to work out.
All right, let's get into these mystery pee jugs. So,
This story is so bizarre.
this guy in Oregon goes to bring in his recycling bin and notices that it wasn't fully empty. So he opens the lid and finds all these jugs of pee just sitting in there, which the recycling guys like picked all the recycling out and then left that, obviously, because they're like, this isn't our problem to deal with. So he's like, well, where did these come from? It keeps happening over the next
And they're
couple weeks.
big jugs.
Like gallon-sized jugs filled with piss. So they keep popping up over the next couple weeks. He finally sets up a camera. He sees this guy in a hood with a BMW pulling up, but he still can't see who the guy is or anything. So eventually, he knows that a man is doing it, but doesn't know who. Eventually, he brings the can in and just stops putting the recycling out. So the guy moves on to his neighbor's house and he just keeps putting the jugs in there. And they still have no idea who it is.
It's very interesting, actually, when I was reading about this, because I was thinking about like a similar thing, I guess, suppose could happen in our neighborhood. And I guess, what are you supposed to do with it? Because you have to keep it. It's like you can't just leave it on the street. I just think that they should be able to call their police department and get this handled, because it's really gross. It's kind of a biohazard. If the recycling is obviously not going to take anything that's got liquid in it, because they can't do anything with it. But even if you could put it in your trash, like what happens if your trash comes before your recycling? You just have to do something with it. And really, why is any person doing this? It's just so bizarre, because it's not like you could pee that much in one sitting. So it almost reminds me of, in the lab, sometimes you have to do like a 24-hour urine. So you have to pee in the same container for a whole entire day just so they can get an idea of how your kidneys are working throughout the day. And that guy had to sit there and pee in that container multiple times to fill it to that. And then to have multiple days in a row, like, what is making you do that? And he's driving a fairly nice car, so you could think that he's not homeless and he could afford to have a toilet. So
but you could also just pee outside, like,
yeah,
why
when you're
you filling jugs?
Yeah, it's just so bizarre. But it's also like this weird way to really torture a person, because it's like wreaking havoc on their neighborhood, and they don't seem like they could really do anything about it.
So it's reminding me of this really bizarre situation that happened, like, at the first, it's not an apartment. When I first moved out, like, as a grown-up, I moved in. My friend's sister owned a house, and I rented a room in her house. And we had this enclosed front porch, and every once in a while, this like item would show up in the middle of the night, like a donut or something, with one bite taken out of it, and be in the enclosed front porch. And she told me it had been happening since she bought the house. And it was really fucking weird because I would get home from work at like 3 o'clock in the morning from the bar, and my roommate would go to the gym at like 5:30. So it was happening in between 3 and 5:30. And this was like before we had the Ring doorbell and everything. And it happened the whole time I lived there and for months after.
Yeah,
We never figured it out.
It was probably just the roommate like snacking on donuts before going to the gym or something.
It was really bizarre. But
Yeah,
we're like, this creepy like man is probably like walking up to the house and leaving these like little signs. It's
that's
a little
like
scary.
serial killer mentality for real.
I know.
And I just don't understand the point of this. And they're also just making note that the pee is like very like dark and dehydrated. It's just so weird.
It's very weird.
If he was trying to, like, I wonder, like, is it targeted to this guy or this particular neighborhood, or is it just random? I don't understand why any person would ever have jugs of their pee unless they don't have. I don't know, because like, where's the guy pooping and stuff too? It's just really weird.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we find out that. Well, I guess not, because the neighbor. I was gonna say, what if this was like a coworker that was trying to torture him over something?
Yeah, he can't. I just feel like if I called my police department and said this, they would do something about it. I know they would.
Well,
because you can't
live in a small town. This person might live in a bigger town or a city, and they might just be like, we have bigger fish to fry, like we're not worried about this. But the guide said he did file a police report, and nobody can figure out who it is. I'm like, I would be sitting out there all night long.
I feel like
waiting.
one of our cops would like sit outside the house all night and wait to see if it happens. Like,
nobody on the whole street is willing to sit on their porch all night and just wait for this guy to show up. Or maybe it's just so random they can't pinpoint when he decides to do it. And like, why is he picking that particular street?
Like that would seriously piss me off, really. Because
disgusting.
It's disgusting, and it smelled like, just because it's sealed, it still smells terrible, I'm sure. And like, to have to touch someone else's piss it's just like, it's not cool. It's just, I don't know what to say.
Listen, when somebody even walking by my house puts their dog shit bag in my trash can, I want to go out there and flip the fuck out. Like, let alone 7 to 8 jugs of human piss. It's disgusting.
I thought you weren't allowed to put stuff in people's trash cans anyway. I thought that was like a no-no.
Please, people do it all the time.
Okay.
So a couple of years ago, this woman in her 30s got a subdermal contraceptive implant. I think first you should explain what that is for everybody.
All right. So sometimes you can get a birth control that it's not a pill. It's more of a permanent birth control, they would say. And you get this 4-centimeter long like rod that's placed underneath of the skin. So subdermal means underneath of the skin of the arm. And it is supposed to release progesterone to stop ovulation so you don't get pregnant. And in general, it's considered a pretty safe and effective form of birth control. And there's a certain placement that should be considered proper. It should be between the groove of the bicep and tricep muscle on the inner side of a non-dominant arm, 7 centimeters above the elbow crease. So that could vary from person to person, especially if people are like super skinny or they have super fat arms like my arms. In that case, like, it just would be like a little bit easier or difficult to put in to people, or to potentially harm them if it's not in the right location. So this woman had one put into her body 6 years prior. She was in her late 30s and she got it put in. And then a week after she got it put in, she realized she couldn't feel it anymore. Now, if you have one of these subdermal implants, just because it's right underneath the skin, when you rub your arm, you should be able to feel the little rod underneath your arm. You could usually even see it kind of underneath of the skin there. And if you do not feel it, you should immediately call your doctor and let them know, because they could quickly do an X-ray or they could do a CT scan to see if it's there and it's in place, because this rod is covered with a certain material that is called barium sulfate, which can be seen on an X-ray and a CT scan. Like it lights it up very nicely on there. So it's very simple to figure out if it has moved or not. Sometimes it could go deeper into the skin, but in this case, it could travel to a different location in the body, which is crazy. So she decided, like, I don't know why, 6 years later, just randomly was at a routine checkup and was like, hey, I had this thing placed 6 years ago and I can't feel it anymore. Is that a problem? And they say, okay, let's x-ray your arm, and they don't see it anywhere in the arm. So then they do a CT scan, and sure enough, they find this 4 centimeter long contraceptive implant embedded in her lung.
I can't believe in all that time she didn't have any symptoms of this at all being a problem.
She had no symptoms. It's considered an embolism, which means that it starts in one location of the body and it goes to another location of the body. And in this case, when it was initially placed, the doctor probably put it into too deep into the arm and went into a vein, which then traveled all the way to the heart and then went into the atrium of the heart, the ventricle of the heart, and then went through the pulmonary artery and got lodged into her lung. So there's different ways that they can remove it. The easiest way is called endovascular, which means they go through the blood vessels and they get these like little pinchy things and they basically pull it out. But they said since it was there for so long, they thought that that wasn't going to be an option because your body would recognize that you had this foreign body in there for years and would build up walls against it. So it wouldn't be that easy to remove it. She could, if she went right away when she first noticed it was missing, this would totally be an option. But for her, they were basically like, listen, we got to cut out like portions of your lung in order to get this out, like lung surgery, removing portions of your lung. And she thought that the side effects were too risky and was like, I'm not doing that. So, and this is like a difficult thing to make a decision for. But I mean, imagine having little kids and stuff and thinking about getting chest surgery to your chest cut open and having to get pieces of your lung removed and stuff. It's really scary. So they decided that they were going to follow up with a CT scan, and they kept following up with her. They confirmed it was still in her lung, and they were just like, listen, like if it just stays there and you don't have any symptoms, then you're cool. And if you start having chest pain or coughing, go right to the hospital. So, like, I'm not saying that this isn't going to give her a problem in the future, because it certainly can. But right now it just seems to be staying there, and she's fine with leaving it there. I feel like I would be like, get this the frig out of me. I don't know.
Yeah, because couldn't it potentially be way worse?
Well, yeah, but it's not right now. So I guess that's what I mean. There's different things that could happen to it. You could start having a foreign body reaction to it. I mean, I'm sure at some point she may have to have this addressed. But right now, she's at the point where it's safe. It's not going to kill her immediately like that. The next thing would just be like some kind of infection possibly, or like I said, like a foreign body reaction that could cause like a mass of tissue to kind of grow around that. But as of right now, she seems fine.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to questions of the day. Every Friday at the @MotherKnowsDeath Instagram account, you guys can head over to our story and ask us whatever you want. First, have you gotten ruptured uteri due to VBAC?
Do you know what that is?
No. Oh, is it bacterial vag? No, it would be
No.
something else. Never
It's
mind.
vaginal birth after cesarean.
Okay.
So sometimes if a woman has a cesarean section, she might want to try to have vaginal birth afterwards. And the reason for that is because like you should always want to do vaginal birth, just because it's the success rate is just so much more. There's the lower risk of infection. You can get up literally, like after I had my kid, got up and went to the bathroom. Like it's just like there's no downtime, there's no scar, there's no risks that come with surgeries like infections or anything like that. So even if you had to have a C-section for whatever reason, some women decide to have vaginal birth after if they're a candidate for it. And there's been a success rate of 70% in people who decide that they want to have a vaginal birth after they have a cesarean section. But there's all sorts of different risk factors associated with that. So they think that women who have had a who had vaginal birth and then had a cesarean section are more likely to be successful with having a vaginal birth after that. The biggest reason of risk, and this is the question that one of our listeners is asking, is when you have a cesarean section, it puts a scar, not just on your abdomen there that you see, but it puts a scar on your uterus. So when your uterus gets bigger and you're giving birth, that area where that C-section scar is always considered to be like a point of weakness because it was cut open before. And they think that sometimes just the trauma and the pushing associated with vaginal birth could like basically bust open that scar. And that happens. That's what she's asking, if there's rupture. Because, so to answer your question, we had a specimen like that in our lab once, and it was actually one of the physician's wives that was giving birth, and they had to give her a hysterectomy right after she gave birth because the previous C-section scar ruptured. But that it is a possibility, but there's plenty of women that also have a success with it. So it's an individual thing that someone needs to decide, but usually the obstetrician will really recommend if they think a person's a good candidate for it or not. There's some other factors, like, see how I had like Lillian and Lucia within 18 months of each other? They're kind of like, and like the further apart the babies are, the better chance of it being successful. There's all sorts of different risk factors. Like I said, if you only had C-sections, maybe your first 2 or 3 pregnancies, and then you want to do vaginal, they might advise against it. So it does happen, but it's rare. I only saw it that one time, and I've seen some case reports of it too, but I don't think it's super common.
All right, 2. If somebody dies because of a suspected OD, is a tox screening done first and they wait for the results before performing an autopsy?
They would do a tox screen right away, so they could stick a needle right into the bladder and pull out urine and do what's called a quick tox screen, which would look for the major drugs that people would take. And depending on the results of that, they would want to do an autopsy. But really, the true toxicology results won't be back for a while. Like sometimes it could take months, and so they're going to do an autopsy right away based upon what the results of the quick tox are. It all depends on what office is doing it, what medical examiner or coroner's office is doing it, but they would never wait for actual toxicology results because of how long they take. So you would only have quick. And quick is just like cocaine, opioids, things like that. Like you wouldn't, I just wrote about a case of a person that tried to take gopher killer and strychnine, and that's something that wouldn't be in a quick tox because that's not people don't commonly ingest that. And but that could come out in a later toxicology report that would come out, weeks to months later.
All right, last. What are your 3 love languages? There's only like 5.
So I looked this up because I really don't know about this. And I looked it up and I don't know. I just think it's kind of dumb, honestly.
It's just like, I guess, out of the 5, which is affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and receiving gifts. It's like what you are most receptive to.
All of it? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I was trying to do this before we answered this question for you guys. Like, I went on the website and there's like a test and it was asking questions. And it's like, would you rather receive a nice text message or would you rather have a hug? And I'm like, I want both. Like, is that, I don't know. Like, I couldn't pick one or the other because me and Gabe do this thing every day, like multiple times a day, because we saw this like Instagram post a while back that was just talking about like hugging and having like a connection for 40 seconds and we just do it every day as a joke. Like we'll just say like, oh, has it been 40 seconds yet? Do you feel the love connection we're having right now? And stuff like that. So I enjoy that, but I also enjoy him leaving me notes too. So I don't know. Like I can't pick one or the other. I think that the gift thing, I guess I would say, is my least likely. I'd rather get the other stuff. But like Gabe does my laundry. I love that. That's awesome. He leaves me no. I mean, I don't know. Like, there's not one that I like more than the other, I guess. It's just.
I mean, I guess you should have a significant other that gives you some of everything, not just one thing. But yeah, like you're saying, like I am in agreement with you where like I want a little bit of everything. Like with the affirmation, I like, my husband tells me every day I'm beautiful and he tells me he loves me every day, but I don't need him to be obnoxious about it at the same time. I know that because we're married and I know he loves me and he thinks I'm beautiful. You know what I mean? The same with like other things. Like I do respond really well to quality time, but I also want my own quality time with myself. Everything, I like
I thought it was weird that there was a chart that was like telling you to find out what your significant other's love language was and telling you things like not to do, and I'm like, that's kind of like weird, right? I don't know. I just thought it was just weird to just make somebody, oh, do this instead of this. I'm like, well, I don't really want somebody to not be authentic because they're trying to like cater to my needs. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think you and I just don't really get it. I feel like a lot of people that are like super into like zodiac stuff, this is in their realm, and I'm also not in touch with all of that.
So I'll have to ask. I have my sister-in-law's into the zodiac stuff, so let me ask her if she's into the love language thing. I've heard people say it before. I just never. I don't know. I don't really care. Maybe I should care more. I don't know.
I'm just like, be nice to me, and like we'll go from there.
It changes every day too. Like, like one day you might want more affection or notes or whatever. I don't know. Too crazy to have to pick one thing.
And listen, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I don't like gifts. I mean, I don't need like a Chanel bag, but I like when I'm bought like coffee once in a while and just little things here and there is nice. All right, well, thank you guys so much. Please don't forget to enter our 1 million download giveaway and head over to Apple, Spotify, or YouTube and then send us a screenshot of your submission. And if you have a story for us, please submit it to stories@motherknowsdeath.com or send us a message on Instagram.
Thanks, guys. See you later in the week. Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.